Hello, everyone. My name is Sia Karamalegos. If you haven't met me yet, I'm one of the co-organizers for the Eleventy meetup. And I'm a freelance web developer. I used to be in New Orleans as of a few days ago, and I've been driving a U-Haul truck with some dogs and trying to find a house now in Durham because tired of hurricanes and power outages and boil water notices, even though I love the city. So this is going to be really informal. Feel free to jump in. We'll treat it more like a live stream, so it's totally fine to jump in and ask questions as we go along. I am showing this picture because I actually have an article on this topic already, which I'll share the link after just so you don't read the article while I'm talking. So everything's there too. If this video doesn't come out that great, then we'll always have this as a backup. But we can even go beyond this because I'll show you the actual code for my blog and some of the other cool things I use Cloudinary to do. But yeah, so I started. Let me open this up. Oh, I'm the Green Greek on Twitter. I'll post a link to that too somewhere, or someone else can. Let me open the chat so I can see what y'all are saying. Oh, semi-live stream. It's not really live coding, but it's informal. I love Eleventy, and I'm, I guess, full stack web developer, although I prefer the front end, but I'm also a performance engineer. So I'm super into web performance and a lot of the ways I think it might not be like everyone else. So this is like another way to think of images. I'm not a big fan of, what's the best way to do something? What's the case that works for you? So I'm going to try to remember to give you some of the context about like how I think and why I do certain things, because it either might work for you or other methods might be better, and that is totally cool. That's how web development works, right? So before we get started, just to review, conveniently Ben went over some of this last time, but what is in an image tag? We have a source, which is the file, is a required attribute. We have the source set. Oh, I forgot about the when you hover on things inside of VS Code, it gives you those nifty hints. But the source set is a list of file candidates. So it will be the file name and then the natural width. There's another way to describe these with X descriptors, but I don't do that because I find it very confusing. But we'll talk a little bit more about these widths. So this basically says I have this file and it's 600 pixels wide, even though it has a W next to it. And I have this file, which is 300 pixels wide. And then I have this sizes attribute, which looks a lot like CSS and media queries, and it works like that too. And set and sizes combined give the browser information in HTML super early so that it doesn't have to wait until it downloads the CSS and creates a CSS SOM before it can pick the best candidate for an image. So when we use these things, we're actually giving the browser some power to make the best decision based on the user's device width and device pixel ratio. So we're seeding that power so it can make the best decision. It can also make decisions based on, whether data save mode is on and some other things as well. There's lots of cool things you can do now with some of the prefers attributes. And of course, we always want to put an alt tag if it makes sense. This is not an accessibility talk, but you always want an alt tag, whether it has text in it is a thing. You can leave it empty if it's like duplicative of whatever is right next to it. We won't go down in those details. And then we have width and height. And the reason why we use these is because we used to in the old days, because that's how you would set the image width and height. But in the new days, we still do this because we don't want the image to shift. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later. Then we can also have this nifty new loading attribute, which says, oh, hey, I want you to use the intersection observer and don't load this image unless it's close to the viewport, which is really handy. But you never want to do that for an image that's above because it could be your largest contentful paint, and that will actually slow you down and it'll make your core web vitals slower. And sorry, my dog is adjusting himself. He's so comfortable in my lap right now. And then of course you have all these other things, like you might have a class and a style. There's also decoding. So you can say like decoding equals async. I don't play with decoding much because I feel like there's only certain cases where this actually might be helpful. So most of the time you're ignoring it unless you actually have a problem with too much decoding on your site. But you definitely don't want to do this above the fold again. I'm going to take that back off. So that's your basic image tag. And I also describe this in the article. And That's the text that I just said out loud. That loading equals lazy is a native feature now, which is really cool, but it's only on certain browsers. Let's open up Can I Use and let's see what it looks like lately. Can I use? I always like doing this and see, what's the latest on, how many browsers are supporting it. So we have it in Edge, Chrome, Opera, and Firefox. I don't know what color you want to call this. Avocado green. It's avocado because it's only for images. And these other browsers you can actually do. Cool. So Firefox is basically on. It's Safari. It's always Safari. That's annoying. But I think it's basically, it can be enabled, but only on MacBooks, or this is actually slightly different than last time I looked. Anyways, it's a little annoying. So you need to support more browsers, or what I always do is I look at the analytics. Like for my blog, a big chunk is on supported sites. There's still a chunk on Safari. But for example, I work on a website for an escape room and most of their traffic is through iOS because it's all like tourists in New Orleans. And so they're on their little iPhones in the French Quarter trying to book the escape room. So if you're in that case and you have an issue with images, then you might instead want to use a package like Lazy Sizes, which I'll just go at so you can see what it is. Lazy Sizes. And this is the way, it's a little JavaScript package to give you not native lazy loading as well. So if you need to support, sorry, my dog's very grunty. I don't know if you heard that. She laid down, life is so hard, but left out overnight guac. Cool, Bryce offered another one too. Yeah, there's lots of different packages. This is the one I started with. It's actually one of the tutorials on web.dev if you want to check it out, but there's lots of different options. But I'm also like, I'm like, if this supports, 80% of my users, then it's fine to just do this. Do I really want to add that extra package and then have to like maintain that as another package? Or if I can have that, that native option, it's just so convenient for me. So I usually go for that. So that was a long-winded little explanation on loading equals lazy. But the point is we have, all these different things. And I'm also the kind of person that doesn't like to, I'm not going to say doesn't like to learn new things. I don't necessarily want to learn a new interface if I know the HTML. I know what to do here. And so all I want to do, like all of these things, like it may or may not be in here. I'm always going to have an alt, but the value is going to be different. I'm always going to have a source, but the value is going to be different. And then I may or may not have source set and sizes, and those are going to vary. But all this other stuff I want to be able to set by itself. And I feel like a lot of the plugins for me, just for the way I prefer to work, it's like I had to pass in a ton of variables. But I'm like, why should I do that when really the difficult part is just this source set and sizes and maybe the source depending on the URL. So that's when I decided to approach it in a different way. I do want to give a short plug before we move on because I forgot to mention it. Sizes is sometimes it can be complicated. If you have a lot of CSS, it can be hard to come up with yourself. So I love this little tool called Resp Image Lint to come up with it myself. So if you, and there's links to this in my article as well, so you don't have to look it up. But what you do is you go to a page, for example, this is my article. So if I it's a bookmarklet. So it's a link, but it's actually JavaScript inside the link. When I hover, can you see how it's a JavaScript function? So if I run it, it actually evaluates all the image on my page and it tells me lots of things. Not everything is correct. There's a few bugs in it, so take it with a grain of salt. But what it can give you is really cool because it will, if you have a source set, but not yet the sizes attribute, it will be like, you have source set without sizes, try this sizes attribute, and it will and you can just copy paste it, which is really awesome. Where it disagrees with my sizes attribute here, but how off is it? Oh, you know what? Yeah, because I think I did this before I did a redesign. So yeah, look, my sizes attribute is off. It's try using this. So I could literally copy paste this into my thing and then, use that. Yeah, you can use calc function and sizes. It's basically like CSS. It's just you dump it in your HTML so that the browser knows ahead of time. Because what the browser does, it does this look ahead pre-parser. And so it wants to know which URL for an image to start downloading as fast as possible so that it will be available as fast as possible. right, let's look in here. What else? Oh yeah, to prevent layout shifts, what we do is we add that width and height on the image itself. And then in your CSS, that width and height doesn't have to be the viewed width. So what I do is I just take the original width and height of the image, and what it's basically giving is an aspect ratio, which there is a new aspect ratio attribute, I think, coming through the specs, but I don't know if it's, but if you just put an image width and height on the HTML, and then in your CSS, you set image to max width 100 and then height auto, you won't have weird aspect ratio issues or stretching. And that makes it so that as the image loads, it doesn't shift all the way down once the image actually loads. And so this helps your cumulative layout shift score, which is important for performance. It's that thing, you know, like when you're reading an article and then the image finally comes in, or the ad, and everything shifts and now you have no idea what paragraph you were reading. It's super annoying. So that's how you can fix that. It's pretty cool. In the article, I actually have a link to a Jen Simmons video about this too, if you want to dive in more. So like we have that image tag, but then the other thing we can throw, the other wrench we have is different image formats, right? Like we have JPEGs, which are supported like everywhere. You also have PNGs, of course, and then WebP is a newer format, and then like AVIF, and there's also, you know, all these other new codecs coming out. And so we want to provide whatever is supported by that user's browser and is going to be the fastest. But in order to give all those options, we would actually have to do a picture tag, and then we have, you know, like image, source, and we tell it like what type it is. And so it's just all too much. And one thing I like about Cloudinary is that I don't have to do this. I basically just do the image tag, and then I'll tell you about transformations. If you use the F auto transformation, it will know which is the best format type for that user's browser, and it will deliver that automatically. So you don't have to have all this extra stuff, which is awesome. So yeah. So that's our background on images, right? Let's talk a little bit about filters and shortcodes. If you've never seen a filter, which is, I do all my stuff in Nunjux, so all this is Nunjux, I'm sorry. But you can do this in Liquid too. It will just probably look a little bit different. But filters in Nunjux are, in my head, I call them functions, but they're filters. And so the way they work is you have your variable first, and then you have this pipe operator, and then you have the filter itself. And then if you had more attributes, you would put them after. It's weird. And then a shortcode is very similar, except that it starts with the function name, but it's really a shortcode. And then all your parameters are listed afterwards. There's more to this, but this is like the basics, you know, the first level thing, which we don't really have to go much further on how I implemented this. And I could have used filters instead of shortcodes, but shortcodes were the new hot thing when I did this. And I was like, let me try it out. Like other people were trying it out. So I don't have a thing on why you should use one over the other. I was just like, this is cool. Shortcodes are, I believe they are an Eleventy thing, whereas filters are like a Nunjux thing. So shortcodes, you look up that like functionality in the Eleventy docs. It's not going to exist in Nunjux. But there is sample code for Liquid as well. I don't know if you can do it with other providers. All right, so now we're gonna, what else did I forget? Oh yeah, here you go, template shortcodes. It talks about how to use them. Rest image lint, we did that. And this is the F auto transformation thing in Cloudinary. So when you use Cloudinary, what you do is you have your, I'm just going to give you an overview of what it all looks like. And I'm going to show you like my actual Cloudinary account. So you can see this is my dashboard, and Cloudinary has a pretty generous free tier. I think you get 25 credits automatically. If you see up here, I have 60 credits, and that's because you can do this thing where like, you share the links, but also every sign up you give with like your URL, you get 3 extra credits. And I linked to it in my article. I'm like, you know, you can help me out and get some extra credits if you liked this thing. So you can do the same thing, write an article or share it, and you'll get more credits. But as you can see, I'm only using like 3% of my credits anyways. So it's a pretty generous free tier, and my blog gets a decent amount of traffic. So let me go, if I go to like analytics, that load, we'll see like how much traffic I get. Like, but it's actually, if I go here, yeah, like that's a decent amount of Oh, that's in megabytes. But yeah, that's a lot, like 100 megabytes a day. It's a blog, whatever. Like, I haven't been as active lately because of said hurricane. Yeah. So that's what that looks like. But what you have is, oh, I forgot to show you. That's not what I want. Look at all these things I need to do. They're popping up. I need to find dog sitters. I need to do all these different things. If I go to my media library, I basically have folders up here. Some Sia.codes are all my images. So I have images that exist in Cloudinary. And then when I want to use them, I'll have a URL kind of like this. So this is what the API will look like. It'll be like, res.cloudinary.com. Demo is their account, but I have my own account. And it'll be image upload. And then you'll have these transformations. That's these orange things right here. So this is like C scale, width 500, F auto is format auto. And format auto is that cool thing that will choose the best image format. You don't get AVIF by default. I'll talk more about that later if y'all are interested, because that's a more expensive transformation. But you can request it. And all of the other kind of weird ones. They actually have this cool little Cloudinary image analysis tool. Okay, I totally misspelled that. Websites, they call it the website speed test, which is a bit of a misnomer, but you can put your let's just use this random website that I apparently tested in the past. And it will tell you basically like where you can optimize, but there's caveats in there because it'll show you like some weird format that's not actually used in any modern browsers. That's really small, but it will give you at least an idea of some of the savings you can have. So try that out. It takes a while. We'll come back to it. Where were we? All right. So we talked about F auto. So now if I go actually into the code, what I thought to myself is like, why am I was trying to pass in too many parameters to that image. So I was like, why don't I just use HTML? Because if we look back at my blog, let me just show you a sample post so you can get an idea of what I do. I am not a Markdown purist. I have Markdown and then I put HTML in it. For things like this that are more complicated, because I actually do a figure and a fig caption too. And I don't think there's Markdown for that. So I'm just going to write it in HTML because that's what I know. And, most of the time I do Markdown, but, I could have some other things in here that are in HTML just because that's a easier or better way to do it. And what I figured is like, why not just use the HTML? And then the only things I have shortcuts for are sizes, because I have the default sizes. If that ever changes, if I have an image that's not like the standard width, I can, just give it a different sizes attribute. And then I have source and source set, because remember those now that we have this long URL for Cloudinary. Wrong. Too many tabs. All right. And so everything else is just as needed, and I can modify it based on the case for that image. And so if we look at the code itself, and I can show you the actual file because I have a lot more in there too, but I wanted to give you an idea before we dive down this focus kind of idea. I should probably zoom in a little here. But so I set a bunch of constants in the beginning, like my Cloudinary cloud name, I think is Sia codes or something. And then I actually have folders in my Cloudinary, so I need to give it a folder. And then I have my base URL, which includes that cloud name. And remember, it has like image upload. There's different ways of uploading your images. Because it's just my blog, I just put them on there and then I refer to them. I can actually show you that process if you want. It's not the most exciting automated process, but also whatever, it's fine. And Ben had a really cool way of, because I think he puts all of his articles on dev.to. I usually wait to put articles there. So I don't necessarily put all of my articles on dev.to and then do syndication, because I wait. I've had this popular post on Medium. And even though I have it hosted on my own blog, the Medium one was like outranking my personal blog every time. So now I wait so my own blog gets a chance to maybe beat it in SEO so that the other one doesn't beat it. So it's like a weird strategy that maybe not everyone does, but so I don't necessarily automatically put all my things on dev.to. And then I have a set of fallback widths. So in my source set shortcode, I can pass in custom widths, but for my blog, all the widths are the same kind of size as my code blocks. They're like slightly wider than the text. So they're basically always the same. And I can strategically set a few different widths based on that CSS. Remember, I did restyle. They used to be the same width as the text. So that's why rest image lint actually caught that my sets or my sizes attribute was wrong, which is also probably my fallback width are probably slightly off too. So I need to fix all of that, which is fun. Yeah, you were catching things on live streaming. And I have a fallback width as well. So we set all of our constants, and then I just use JavaScript functions to generate first the source. So let's look at that one. We'll look at the bottom one first. So I generate the URL based on that file name and the width. And the file name actually comes in through the shortcode. So if you see here, I have Possum. This is the file name inside of Cloudinary, Possum, and then it has this short hash thingy. And those fallback widths are what's used by default. So it's file and then width of 680. And so what it does is just generate this link. Base URL, this is quality auto. So it'll automatically choose, the best quality. You can, that might be a default of 70 or 80. F auto is format auto. So pick what format's the best for that device. W underscore is the width of the image. So if I have width, use it. Otherwise, I want you to use that fallback width. And then I have to give it that folder name. I don't know why they put the folder here and not up there, but whatever. And then the file name. And then source set, what it does is it takes that list of that array of fallback widths and it loops through all those fallback widths and it just calls this source function every time for the file name and the width. And so that's how I generate all my source sets and sizes. Oh, I forgot. And it also adds that text. Remember the width descriptors inside source, it adds that as well. Price, yeah, well, remind me again to talk about that in a second after we finish this code, the AVIF stuff. And then what I do for both my filters and shortcodes is I have a separate file for them because my config file was getting too long, my Eleventy config. So I just export them all and then I loop through them in an import in my config file. And this is actually if you set it directly, but I actually do a loop through everything in this file, which is cool. So actually, let me look at the chat really quick. Shortcodes added with add JavaScript function or add short. Cool. Thanks, Ben Holmes. Free tier is awesome. Agreed, Bryce. So any idea when Cloudinary will include AVIF and FAuto for supporting browsers? They do now already. You just have to request to turn it on because it's basically in beta. And I actually wrote another article, which I should add a link inside of this article. Let's go to sia.codes and it's large now because I zoomed in. What to know about AVIF on Cloudinary? The gist is that you have to request it. Actually, you can use it right away if you use a picture tag and you, instead of FAuto, you'd use FAVIF for one of your sources, but you would have to manually write that whole picture tag. But once again, I am lazy, so I don't do that. So if you want to include it inside FAuto, you have to request it because the transformation is much more expensive. Oh, here's that. You can compare like AVIF versus WebP versus JPEG here because every article about AVIF has that. But it describes all of that in this little article, which I will share as well. But it is supported. You just have to request it. And then let's look at the actual code too, because I do some other stuff in here that's not in the article, because when you write articles and you do talks, usually you want to keep it more simple. Because you can see at the top of this file, I also have other things like these SEO aspect ratios. So there's, excuse me. And I have social image URL. So with SEO images, I used to just manually create all my images using ImageMagick and CWebP. But then AVI came out also, and then I'm doing these SEO images. And this is so that I haven't seen them actually used yet. But if we go in and let's inspect this post and let's look at our meta tags. I think they're actually going to be in the body. I wonder if they're in main. Where do I put my meta tags for this? Maybe it's in the head. I have these extra meta tags that are for social or not for SEO. I forgot. Do you know what I'm talking about? You can give that metadata for carousels and event times and things like that. It's not the open graph because I have that too. But it's like when you search for something, like you're like, give me a spanakopita recipe. Sorry, I'm half Greek. So, and you see these cool things at the top, it's like enhanced search. So you can, rich data. It's like that structured data or that rich data. You can provide some stuff like this if it's a relevant thing. So I added those images. There's a thing for ways to provide images. I haven't seen them actually used yet, but so I added that. But if you have to give it several different, you have to give it 3 different aspect ratios. But what's cool with Cloudinary is you can do that aspect ratio thingy. It's somewhere in here. But you can actually generate an image based on an aspect ratio as well. Here it is, full size crop. So that's cool. Like that made it easier to just automatically create those for everything. And then I also do social share images, which I never wrote an article on this because it's basically what Jason Langsdorff did. Because I think he might have also been using Eleventy in his live stream. I can share a link to that if you've never seen it. There's so many tutorials on this. But let's open a Discord and see what it looks like. Let me get rid of that. And let's go to Eleventy Meetup, and I'm going to share this, and hopefully it pops out. Yeah, so you see my share image. This is the meta information that's in my meta tags, the title and the description. But this is a social share image that I actually generate with Cloudinary. And so what it is, I have this background image. And the background image includes my little dot with Sia.codes and these little complete dots lines. But then my title and description are automatically generated based on data that I have inside of Eleventy, which a lot of people do this. They do it in different ways, but you can do it in Cloudinary. And that's what all of this is. So I have my image file, which is the file that I have loaded in Cloudinary. And then I have a font. So I'm using this special font, which you actually have to put it in the root of your Cloudinary folder if you want to use a special font, and font sizes and offsets. So the way this works is so that the spacing between it is always constant. So this title it's aligned bottom and the description is aligned top. So they're always the same width away from each other. It's probably too much information, but in case you wanted to know. And I generate all this with Cloudinary as well. So it's just automatically generated anytime I have a new page or whatever. The actual code for generating is really long because I have all these different conversions and things like that, which Jason explains better. I could write a post, but whatever, I did basically what he did. I was going to inspect this so we could actually see it. Yeah, this is the full link. What's fun though is you can copy this, and if you're having trouble generating your image, you can copy this and then you can start editing things here. Like maybe I want oh gosh, this is so much. Maybe I want the size to be 1200 instead, or the width. This is going to look weird. It just got a little bit shorter. But yeah, that was fun. That was probably TMI. Those are the other things I use for Cloudinary, which is fun. I'm trying to think if there's any. The one thing I always forget in my posts is what I'll do is I copy this from one post to the next, and then I just edit the file name and the alt and the width and the height and the fig caption. But I'll copy this and I'll forget, and either I'll copy it from further down and it has loading equals lazy, and so then I mess up. It's the loading equals lazy that I always mess up because I copy paste. What's really cool is you can add your Core Web Vitals tracking to, I have to do that in this browser, Web Vitals report. And this can help give me a clue if I've messed up on a particular page. So what I did is I add this little Web Vitals package, JavaScript library, to send to my Google Analytics. And then I can, does that actually submit? Sorry, the Zoom stuff is always in the way, so this doesn't always work. But you can see this is my largest contentful paint metrics and LCP over time, first input delay. This is not a talk performance, but I just wanted to point these all out. Cumulative layout shift, This can tell me if I'm doing something, but these are only like very small tail things. So this is like really good. I have very little JavaScript on my page, so this is pretty good too. And LCP is decent. Actually, it says it's all green, but I can do this. And then sometimes, yeah, they have by page. So if any one of these is like yellow or red, I know, oops, I should go look on that page and see, you know, what's going on. This is a cool little package that will get reported inside of your analytics. There's also, if you have enough traffic, you might be in the Chrome user experience report data, but it won't capture all of your traffic, or maybe not by URL. So it's nice to have your exact data and you can inspect it that way. Now I'm rambling, so I will stop. And all questions, or you know, if you need to go, feel free to just jump off. That's fine. But yeah, feel free to unmute yourself and ask questions or anything like that, or ask me to clarify something, like the code in case you want to see it. I know we're over time, so you don't have to. So at me in the Discord server or on Twitter, that's the Green Greek, and ask me questions there.